Hello and welcome to Inside the Avatar Studio. Inside the Avatar Studio brings together innovative leaders from the virtual technology frontier to discuss their perceptions, their perspectives, and predictions of what being virtual means in today's society. I'm your host, Kevin Feenan. With me today is AJ Kelton, better known as AJ Brooks in Second Life. AJ is the Director of Emerging Instructional Technology for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at Montclair State University in New Jersey. He has presented on the topic of virtual worlds in education both in the U.S. and internationally, and is the author of numerous articles on Second Life and virtual worlds. AJ is also the founder and current leader of the EDUCAUSE Virtual Worlds Constituent Group and founder and chief moderator of the Virtual Worlds Education Roundtable, a forum bringing together educators from all over the globe interested in discussing a wide variety of topics involving virtual worlds. AJ, thank you very much for being on our program today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Cool. The very first thing I need to ask you, it's been 4 years. Have you figured out what we say and how we deal with skeptics yet?
Skeptics? There are skeptics? I haven't met a skeptic yet. Every time you build a better mouse, they build a better mousetrap, right? So I found the problem with skeptics is that no matter how you try to, so there are basically two types of skeptics. There's ones who are skeptical because they don't really understand, and it's easy to approach those people because they are willing to say, listen, I don't think this whole thing is cool, or I don't think it works, or I don't think it's a good idea. But the attitude behind it is, but I'm willing to listen to what you have to say. And then there are the skeptics who are going to make fun of you no matter what. So no matter what you say to them, it just doesn't matter. And so those skeptics I typically don't address unless I absolutely have to. Because there's really no way you can say anything that's going to convince them one way or the other that virtual worlds are a viable alternative with clear and, at this point, documented pedagogical advantages in certain situations. They're just not willing to hear it.
So I know I'm pretty sure you were probably there. Were you in the virtual worlds, the SLCC conference in 2007 in Chicago?
I was.
Right. Where Larry Pixie had, as far as the ending keynote address, he was basically saying this whole thing in terms of you can't really tell somebody about Second Life. It has to be experienced.
Right.
Right.
Right. I would completely agree with that. I mean, it's sort of like telling someone how something tastes, right? I mean, you can describe mint chocolate chip ice cream until you're blue in the face, but until someone tries mint chocolate chip ice cream, they're really not going to get it. So can you, by the way, you all now know what my favorite ice cream is. So
there we go. Now we know what to get you for Christmas.
That's right. That's right. Cases of mint chocolate chip ice cream. I have a big freezer in the basement, not a problem. But yeah, I think it's really hard to, even with the videos, we obviously do a decent amount of work, or have in the past done a decent amount of work here at Montclair State University with virtual worlds, and one of our signature projects has been the Theorist Project, which we're proud to say that now that the island that the Theorist Project in Second Life it's not been renewed, we're moving into our own island on Jocadia Grid. We're going to be introducing that soon. So even showing people a video of that doesn't really do it justice. They need to experience things like this themselves, and then they get it. They can, more often than not, you see, when they come in and they experience it and they're open to understand, you can see a light bulb go on, even if they don't think it's for them, right? So, I don't remember who it was that said something along the lines of that, I'm willing to entertain a thought even though I don't agree with it. And so, we have plenty of faculty here who say, this looks really cool. I don't know how I would apply it to what I'm doing, but I think it's cool that you're doing it. And it's after they see something, in person, and the light goes on. Oh, okay, now I get it. Now I understand.
Right. When you're talking about bringing somebody into the environment and this idea about now I understand, it's one of the things that I've noticed, and it's something that I'm getting a little bit jaded as I've been here for a while, but you start looking at different builds, and there's a lot of, like, you go to certain builds and there's a lot of static content, which is kind of cool, just the fact that we can, even just do that. But when you're bringing something new in, how important is that aspect of having dynamic things that people have immediate access to on first entry into something like this?
That's a great question, and I think it's very important. I think it's critical, because one of the things that I think we need to do with the virtual environment is show why it's different than the rest of the static environments. What makes it different than a web page? What makes it different than a webinar or a webcast or a video conference? What makes virtual worlds different? And the ability to interact with different objects, to have different objects do things, and it's not just, and so pretty much everything I couch at this point is sort of, you have, Second Life, which is doing some things, and then you have OpenSim, which is sort of catching up from behind. So some of these things do apply to both, and some of them right now only apply to Second Life, and some of the things that are coming, like pathfinding, right? So we've only seen videos about pathfinding, but being able to do pathfinding, being able to truly interact with it, you have NPCs to interact with, that's a big thing. I know many of you know Iggy Onomatopoeia and his Nevermore build with his Poe work that he's done, and the Usher House. And it recently came back to Second Life, and there were things that he could do in Second Life that he wasn't able to do in OpenSim, and it was some of that interaction that really made the difference. And so I think it is really important. It's great to replicate area. This is a beautiful amphitheater, right? It's the first thing I thought when I teleported in here. I'm like, wow, this is beautiful. I would love to see something like this on my campus. And this serves a particular purpose. And there's also interactivity here that you wouldn't normally find in an environment like it on a particular physical world campus, and that's what makes this different. You can't really click signs and get a note card somewhere else. You can't really interact with certain things and have them do things based on what you do. And I think that interaction is important because it shows one of the benefits of the virtual environment.
Doesn't Apple have an app for that?
If they don't, they will soon.
I'm sure. When we were comparing virtual worlds against things like mobile technologies, we had this great promise about 5 years ago that said, virtual worlds is where it's going to be, and right now everybody's, they're just, you put an iPad in front of them and their eyes just go like saucers. Has that sort of detracted potentially from sort of the promise of what virtual, the 3D virtual world was sort of going to enable business and education from potentially doing?
Well, yes, of course. I think part of the reason why we all thought that this was the best thing since sliced bread was because we had seen a dramatic change over a short period of time from when we first got in. All right, so for old timers like you and me, we saw a very dramatic difference with additions of things, and then all of a sudden those changes stopped. And the innovation that was virtual worlds stopped. So what we did was we based our observations. The reason we thought that virtual worlds were going to be it, and I was one of those people too. And I've had to eat those words, right? Even Gartner thought that things were going to be different than they are today. And part of the reason is if you look at a trajectory on a graph, you see this really sharp increase in innovation and changes and updates, and then it just flattens out. And I'm not talking about the hype cycle. I'm talking about the innovative changes in the environment. I have a student works for me. He's a federal work study student. He's 18 years old. He's a freshman. And he works on our team here. And one of the things that our team does is when they first start working is they learn how to work in Second Life. And when he came in for the interview, and what I do is I do a traditional interview, but then I sit them down in front of Second Life and I say, okay, here's 15 minutes in Virtual Abilities Orientation Island. After 15 minutes, I'll come back. And so I let them roam around for 15 minutes. And so when I came back to him, the first thing he said to me was, I looked at this a couple years ago. It looks exactly the same as it did then. And so granted, that meant he was on the grid as a minor, big surprise. But you know, that was so telltale to me that was this last September too, that for 2 years that he did not see a dramatic change in the SL environment. And in the first year that people like you and me were in Second Life, we did see dramatic changes. I mean, I can remember when voice got added and everybody was like, oh, voice is going to be the death of virtual worlds. And other people were like, no, it's going to be the savior of virtual worlds, right? And and obviously it wasn't the savior or the death, but you know, it was a big deal. And in that short period of time, we saw very significant changes, and we based our future predictions that those changes were going to continue at that pace, and they just haven't. And yet technology around us has changed at that pace. I mean, the fact that we can't do Second Life on an iPad, okay, listen, I understand that this is a very complicated technology. The fact that most people don't get how complicated these interactions are and what's really, really going on in the background to make sure all of this happens. I get that. But the world is changing at a very fast pace, and virtual worlds are not keeping up. And that's why we're now back behind the curve, and people are saying, oh, yeah, well, that's a was thing. It's not, it's not on the vanguard anymore because they've not kept up. The fact that I can't do a virtual world anything significant on my iPad is a significant detractor. You know, I don't think it would be particularly good on a mobile phone. Maybe you should, and I know that there are mobile apps. I know that. And I don't use them. I know others who do for simple things. But if I really want to get people involved, they need to develop a mobile way to interact with this. And I think it's coming, but the big boy didn't jump on the ship, right? I think that's really what the problem was, is this was a train that was being pulled by Linden Lab, and they just stopped going in a particular direction and made some business decisions to go in other directions. Decisions I'm not sure I would have made, and decisions I'm not sure I agree with.
Right. I don't think you're going to get too much of an argument for me on that one, because
I didn't think so.
Let's put it this way. I mean, one of the big things that really, what was that? I think it was 2008 at the SLCC conference. You know, here it is. You've got all these educators down in Tampa, Florida, and we're sitting there going, Linden Lab still needs to innovate. And by the way, here's a list of things that we absolutely need, right?
They asked us for that.
They did, and they did
asked us
nothing
for that list.
Yeah. So but in the meantime, they had completely changed the way that they were going about things, right? I mean, they started this whole, we're going to take this platform and we're going to jump into bed with big business, when the platform just wasn't ready for it yet.
Yeah.
I mean, the core things like just peer-to-peer file sharing, being able to, for an instructor to be able to come in and drop a folder of here's your homework for this week. You can't do it, and I'm sorry, note cards just don't cut it, right?
Right. That's right. Well, and I think that for better or for worse, that the folks who are running Linden Lab at this point have made it abundantly clear that certain markets are not their focus. It's not that they don't want our business. They're happy to have our business as educators, but they have said we can only have so many irons in the fire. We can't tend to all of them. And so we can only focus on some of them. And education nonprofits were two of ones that were dropped. Clearly by firing the entire education staff and dropping the discount that was keeping many people in Second Life, sent a very clear signal. And the people who worked for Linden Lab at the time told us that. They said, listen, we appreciate your business. We're happy. I had a conversation with Terrence at the Virtual Worlds Education Roundtable, and he said, we need to drop back and punt and focus in certain areas, and education is not going to be one of them. And so, I think it's so they don't care that we can't drop no cards, anything better than no cards. They're looking to them. I'm not in their board meetings. I'm not in their weekly meetings. I don't know what they're saying, but it seems to me as if turning Second Life into a game environment or an environment that's more, game-oriented seems to be where they're headed. And personally, I don't think people are going to look at Second Life and say, let's go play that game, when they can look at much significantly better graphic games. One of the benefits of a virtual environment like this is you have user-generated content. The reason why World of Warcraft looks so awesome is because you can't move the mountains, right? You can't change some of the buildings. They don't have the same kind of user-generated content that we have. So they can afford to use up some of that space with really great high-res graphics. We don't have that, and I don't know what they're thinking.
Well, I want to talk on the gaming aspect of a little bit, because it raises an interesting thing. I don't know if you've been in. I'm assuming you probably have, because you seem to be in everything in here. But if you've been into any of the Linden Realm games that they've sort of set up, and maybe it's just me, but I've gone into a couple of them, and it just seems that here it is. We've got this environment that is aimed for, at this point now, 15 plus. Right? Used to be 18 plus. They've sort of dropped it 15, whatever. So 15 plus, and Linden Realms is creating games designed for 8-year-olds. And I'm sort of like, yeah, there's some interesting things they're doing with Linden Realms that maybe educators and business owners and what have you can take advantage of, but there seems to be this big disconnect. And I don't, is this something that you've been noticing as well, or do you have a different...
I think you're right. I think that one of the interesting things about Linden Realms is the tool set that was released that makes certain things that weren't available previously soon will be available, or are now becoming available. Certainly they're available. I believe they're available in beta, certain beta grids. I don't believe that any of them have been brought on to the main grid yet. I hadn't been following it all that closely because after the initial buzz about it, it ceased to interest me. Simply because, it just didn't fall within the center core of my radar. So it wasn't something that, it's like I figured if something significant developed that I would hear about it. And I haven't heard much about it. So...
Well, at the same time, we haven't heard all that much about Mesh either. Mesh was one of those things that sort of popped up its head, and then it's just sort of not quite died, but...
Well, Mesh was going to save Second Life.
Yeah.
And Linden Realms was going to save Second Life. And the fact of the matter is that getting a stable environment that has voice that works on a consistent basis and... it reduces lag, and I was saying before the broadcast that I had to stay at work tonight to attend this at home. At work, because my home computer, which is not an old computer, doesn't run Second Life well anymore, and it certainly has great trouble running anything else while Second Life is open, including, especially something that's resource intensive like an application like Skype or something along those lines. So until we get past some of that, it's going to be, the point of entry needs to be, listen, improving the first hour experience is really important. But if they can't even sign in and see anything that's more than 16 meters away from them because they have to turn their, they get that pop-up message that says, "We're sorry, your monitor isn't capable of this setting, so we're changing your settings automatically for optimizing performance," and it's on the lowest setting possible. So you can't see more than 32 meters or whatever it is. Until we get past that point, the first hour experience is going to be unimportant because people are going to come in, they're going to say, "This is uninteresting to me," and they're not going to come back and they're not going to stay.
Yeah, I mean, to a large extent, it almost sounds as if we've, while we've made some progress, we've actually taken a lot of steps back.
Well, I think it's not steps back. I think it's just not steps forward. We're standing in the same place. That list that you and I talked about earlier that was presented at the request of the people from Linden Lab. They said, "We want to hear from you. Tell us what you want." And we told them. And that list is probably the same exact list as it is today. Because I know that when we talk about these things at VWER, that people are bringing up the exact same issues. And some of these people are people who haven't been in for years. So they're coming up with these ideas on their own.
Well, that was it, because one of the things that I actually wanted to ask you about was this thing in terms of, right at the moment you're very quickly approaching the 150th roundtable for VWER, and so in the library you've got like 147 of them there. So within the next couple of months you're going to hit 150, which is kind of cool. But topics that come up time and time again, I'm sure there's a number of real hot buttons that people just keep saying, what about this? Why can't they do this? How do we fix this? Are there very, very specific ones that people are very, put more emphasis on or get more passionate about than some of the other topics?
I'm sure there are. Yes. First, we haven't imported all of the library into that library on our website. So it's 147 or whatever. I'm amazed that you actually sat and counted them, Kevin. So we were actually over 208. I think that this last week's with you guys will be 209 because we just celebrated our 4th anniversary. Some of the older ones, we were the Second Life Education Roundtable for a while, and then when we saw what happened to Jo Kay when Second Life turned on her and served her a cease and desist order for using the SL in her wiki that was an amazing resource for all of us. And then I know that a similar instance happened with the guys from Sloodle. We, as an organization, met and decided. Ultimately the decision was mine, but the advice and the consult was all the same from everybody, and that is, we need to detach ourselves because someday it is going to be about more than just Second Life. And that's when we changed our name to the Virtual Worlds Education Roundtable. So for about a year and a half, we were the Second Life Education Roundtable. And I think that we hit on the two biggest issues that people have. One is usability, and the other is the steep learning curve, or that first hour experience. So, in education, when we talk about someone like what we've had to do here, thank goodness we had very good cooperation from our Office of Information Technology here at Montclair State University. They deserve. Very often people at universities are critical of their OIT or their IT department, and I'm one of those. But in this particular instance, I can't say enough about how cooperative our OIT department has been, making sure that Second Life is available on all public computers here at Montclair State University. So we have 3 public computing labs, and the SL client, the most recent SL client, is on all of those computers. So students who say they can't do Second Life for their courses on their home computer can go into a public lab or take a loaner out of the library, one of the library computers. They have loaner laptops for like an hour or two, and they can do their homework. So we're very lucky in that respect that we've had that sort of cooperation from them. But until I'll give you a very good example. A couple of years ago, Montclair State University signed an agreement with, at the time it was Wimba, then we switched to Illuminate, and of course those have now been bought by the evil empire Blackboard, and it's called Collaborate. So the reason why we signed a license with them is because it was a good synchronous classroom type product, and it was something that could be used even at dial-up. So even someone who had dial-up access could use, at the time, it was Illuminate. I don't know if the same is true for Collaborate, but at the time that was true for Illuminate. That was very important because I'll give you another example. I know of a student who works on campus who has no internet access at home. And in order to do his work, he needs to go sit at a local Dunkin' Donuts or whatever it is. And he has to borrow the one laptop, the one computer that the entire family shares. And this is, I don't live, I live in New Jersey. This is, a fairly metropolitan area. But these are people who have to make decisions about, do we pay the rent or do we have internet access? And rent wins. Food on the table wins every time. And until you can make something available, now you're never going to find a product that works for everybody when those circumstances are present. But until people can use it on any laptop, not the best laptop, or any desktop, not the best desktop, it's a very difficult thing to require for a teacher to require for their course, because you exclude students who don't have access to certain things. Now, we were very lucky, like I said, that we were able to have use of it here on the campus, and we can say to a student, well, then you're just going to have to do that homework when you're here on campus. That's what, which is, hopefully you don't have to do that, but that's what we've, there have been a couple of occasions where we have. And so I think until you get past that point, where someone can do it on any computer. Forget mobile for a bit, and any regular computer that they can use it. That's probably the biggest issue. The second biggest issue is it takes so long to get them in. Now, I think that has changed a bit over time. I think that, as a matter of fact, I've been very pleasantly surprised with how adaptable, especially the students who work for me. I have 3 students who work for me. They're all freshmen, and they've become significantly good at building and interacting in virtual worlds. As a matter of fact, as we've recreated, here's another big problem: you can't export anything from Second Life unless you're the creator of the object. So we have this Theorist project that was created by a wide variety of people, but everybody who was, a Montclair State student or a Montclair State employee. So in essence, because they were doing the work for a Montclair State course, and it was so in essence, we have the right to we should have the right to export that and to move it somewhere else. And because of Linden Lab's policy, we are unable to do that. Now, I don't want to get the creative types out there all riled up. I understand completely that there are challenges right now with this whole system. You have somebody who makes their money off of what they create in a virtual world, and if you could just export it willy-nilly, I can't believe I just used willy-nilly in a context, but if they can export it like that, and then someone can make copies of it or change it or whatnot, it is problematic, and I get that. This isn't an easy solution. But the fact that we've had to rebuild the entire thing by hand was a problem. But these students have just shown amazing skill, and the faculty member who's driven this project has said she thinks the new build is actually better than the old build. So that speaks to their ability to develop these skills, and I think it's coming more now as some of the younger students come up through. We've said this for years, right? K0 has a wonderful radar chart about where people use virtual worlds. And in presentations I've been making for the last 3 or 4 years, I say just spin the chart, right? You have 10, 12-year-old kids who were using Club Penguin, and they're starting to learn how the interface works. And as they get older and end up in our schools, in our higher education schools, they're bringing that skill set with them. So maybe they haven't seen Second Life, but the up arrows and the down arrows and how to walk and how to instant message in a virtual world, those are skills they developed using other virtual worlds, even though they may have been game-type virtual worlds like, some of the Disney ones and, like Club Barbie and things like that. So I think more and more we're starting to see people get a little bit more accustomed to it, but that first hour experience is always a challenge in the classroom. Because your classrooms are never homogeneous, right? Your classrooms are never all 18 to 21-year-old students. You're going to have, it's a bell curve. It's a normal distribution. You're going to have, some, maybe 17-year-olds who are in college a year early. Very few of those. And then you have mostly 18 to 21-year-olds, but at the other side of the distribution, right, maybe it's not a completely normal distribution, maybe it's less skewed, but nonetheless, at the end you've got, these people who are returning students who aren't as adept at the computer as some of the younger people are because they haven't been using them as long, and then some senior folks who are coming back for an education. And, this creates challenges in the classroom. So I think, a very long answer to your very short question was, I think those are probably the two biggest things, the initial learning curve, and the technology threshold. And those are ones that we've seen over and over and over again.
Right. There's a number of things that you sort of touched on. And like I said, every once in a while I like to go on these esoteric tangents, but I mean, it was at one point in time there was this big thing, and there was this, I'd almost call it like a hippie mindset in terms of, oh my God, Second Life is going to bring world peace because everybody's the same in Second Life, right? I mean, there are no disabilities, there are no big, fat, tall, what have you, right? Everybody is,
unless they want to be.
Unless they want to be, right? Everybody in here is the beautiful people, right? And this is a very old conversation.
Right.
But, it's this whole thing in terms of, I guess to a certain extent, one of the things that you raised was this difference between, especially in the first hour experience, between the haves and the have-nots. And this difference in, I guess, sort of economic circumstances and how it applies, I guess, not just to education, but I guess to all aspects in terms of society of people that want to fit into something like a Second Life or an OpenSim or an IMUV or whatever else, right? If we create these technology barriers, I mean, is this, and I don't want to put this in context of the man and the New World Order, but I mean, is this not really sort of, to a certain extent, some way of sort of separating those people that maybe should be getting together versus those people that are in those depressed economic circumstances? I mean, is this just not creating one more barrier between sort of the rich and the poor type of thing?
Well, that's a really interesting question. SES is always, I think it's always a factor, whether it's technology enhanced or even whether it's the traditional classroom. I think anytime, I think that there's cultural capital that comes with a particular, with the circumstances and the way in which we grow up. And those circumstances. And it doesn't mean that people can't overcome some of these challenges. Obviously people do. But I think that certainly, anytime you include technology, the answer is yes. Now, I have friends of mine who, I recently saw someone post something on Facebook saying that, they were witness to someone who was paying for something at a supermarket with food stamps while talking on their iPhone. And they questioned that. And I guess I can understand that. So there's always going to be choices that people make as they go through life. But I think in general, that anytime technology is included, unless we are providing the technology for them, that it is creating a digital divide between those who have the ability to not just have the technology, but have the technology that can accommodate, this bleeding edge application. All right, maybe virtual worlds aren't bleeding edge anymore, but they're certainly leading edge, or at least at the edge,
or over the edge,
or depending on which party you're attending.
Yeah.
I think it does, and that's why I think it's important that we strive to, if we're going to use it in education, then I think that it's important that we strive to provide an equal experience for folks by doing the model that Montclair has set down. I think is a great model, where we make it available to them in the public labs. So it's sort of leveling the playing field. Now, like any state, New Jersey has very well-to-do areas where young people have computers all their lives. My niece was very fortunate she's now 18. She has had, I have one of my favorite pictures of her is when she was maybe 5 or 6 years old, sitting at my father's desk, which is where the computer was in my parents' house, and she's sitting at the computer. I don't remember what she was doing. She couldn't have been doing anything too complicated because this was, 13 years ago. So maybe she was a little older than that. But I know that there are, I just mentioned the young man that I know who they only have one computer that they share and no internet access at home. I'm sure there are many people in cities like Patterson, Passaic, Camden, Newark who have the same problem, or same situation, and they come to Montclair State University as students. And so if they're sitting in a classroom, that student and the other student, and it's, let's say, a writing class, okay, so the student who's grown up with the computer all their life, they're going to be facile at going, even if it's going to the public lab, they're going to be much more facile at using the computer than someone who the first time they even saw a computer was the 3 that were in their computer room in their high school. And they never saw one at home, and maybe if they were lucky, they got a half hour on it every time they needed it. So this is what I meant about cultural capital and socioeconomic status. And so I think you're absolutely right that we do create, as much as technology catches up to try and close the digital divide, we always find ways to reopen it, and to some extent, so not we individually, but we as a society. And I think as long as there are innovators who are out there willing to say, I want to try this, and educators or innovators, they're always willing to say, hey, this looks cool. How can I apply this to make learning better? That's one of the things I love about being involved in this industry, is that there are so many people out there. A lot of times some of these people are afraid of technology, but you get someone who finds something that they really are interested in, and it's, let's go. How do I do it? Teach me. It's wonderful. These are the pioneers. And that's one of the things about educators in the virtual world, is that they are truly pioneers. The problem with pioneers is they're always the ones with the arrows in their back. So, so we're the ones who take the grief. That's another thing that we've talked about at the VWR meetings. This is something that Iggy is going to be trying to herd the cats tomorrow at 3 p.m. Second Lifetime, when the VWR holds our special meeting, which we're so thrilled to be doing. Thank you so much for the invitation. Following an exceptional keynote. I'm going to put a plug in here for your conference and for the keynote. No Clue Kid is awesome, and people should tune in and go and listen to what she has to say. She's amazing. And then stick around for the VWR meeting. And Joe Isid, Iggy Onomatopoeia, is going to be taught. The title is Resistance is Futile. How do we overcome this gap now that's created where people say virtual worlds are so yesterday? It's tough. It goes back to your question about the skeptics.
Yeah, well, I mean, the skeptic was actually something that you guys had on the about the VWER, right? In terms of the original question that was asked when you guys started this. I want to ask one more question on this idea of social leveling, because and then we'll go off on a little bit of a different direction. Inside the education field, I mean, obviously, universities, colleges, high schools, what have you, they have a vested interest in establishing a social contract in order to level the playing field for as many people as possible that go through those types of educational systems. I mean, there's always the whole thing about can you afford to go to college, but sort of once you get there, there's this real impetus to try to make the playing field as level as possible. Should companies like Linden Labs, because I mean we all saw where Philip Rosendale was taking things in the very early days of Second Life, but should companies like Linden Labs have a social contract with their customer base?
Well, that's it. I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I think, but what I do think is that if they establish a social contract with them, that it's wrong to change that. In other words, if they say, and we can use this as an example, if they say, come and invest in this, come and bring your universities to us, and in exchange for that, we're going to give you a discount, to turn around and say, we're just going to get rid of that entirely without consulting you, and too bad. And, oh, by the way, you have to give us the money within 6 months because that's when the price is going up. Now, they later changed some of that, but, I think so. So if you do establish a social contract with, folks with a particular industry, that it's wrong to break it. Whether they should establish it in the first place, whether it's with individuals or with organizations, I think that's a question that each individual organization needs to make. I mean, ultimately, a business is a business, and if it has a social contract with its users, it's because that's a conscious decision that the owners or people who run the company decide to make about the way that company is going to be run. I don't know that there's anything inherent that's necessary about that says that Linden Lab is required to create that kind of social construct with all of its users. I just think that if they do, that they shouldn't turn back from that.
Right. So, because I guess to a certain extent, I mean, we have this dichotomy between, corporations being considered a person under the law, and then, really corporations being, literally the whim of whatever the board of directors that are sitting at that particular point in time. Right. So,
right.
And we've clearly seen that with Linden Lab over the past, 4 years in terms of the multiple turnarounds that they've done.
Well, right, but that would be predicated on the fact that you believe that it's right that corporations should be considered equal to people under the law, right? I don't believe that should be. I mean, so right. So this goes to the heart of Citizens United and some of the things that have happened recently, which hopefully won't stay on the books longer. But I think that if we're going, first of all, I don't think we should say that corporations are the same as people, period. I think corporations aren't the same as people. But if you are going to say that a corporation is the same as a person, then you should hold that corporation to all of the same standards that you hold people. And that's right now where the gulf is. Right, so the whole premise, I in some ways reject the premise, and that is that I don't think corporations should be treated like people. They're not. Corporations, unless it's a nonprofit organization where profit is turned back into the corporation, but even then, nonprofit's a misnomer. You could still pay your CEO $5 million a year. Right? People think nonprofit means you don't make money. You do make money in a nonprofit. Actually, some nonprofits can be very profitable. Right, but it just means that money doesn't go back to the shareholders. So, but a business, a business has only one interest, and that is to remain in business and to be profitable. Now, individuals who are running those businesses may choose to infuse in their business different ethos, different things, and that's up to the individual. But I think business as a whole, you don't get into a business to not make money. Don't get me wrong, there are people who are going to listen to that and they're going to say, well, yeah, I got into this, but that's, I think that the culture of business, of a corporation, of a company, is that you want to be successful. And successful means being able to afford to continue to stay in business and perhaps grow so that you can be more successful at what you're doing. And I don't think that's equivalent to being a person.
Okay. So let me move off that topic for the time being, because I don't want to beat that one sort of to death. In terms of where we're going with all of this stuff, in terms of what the next 5 years or so are looking at. You've talked a little bit about in terms of this Pathfinder thing that's upcoming, and some of the differences between OpenSim and Second Life, and obviously there's other types of things that are out there. Are there other types of technologies that, from a virtual standpoint, that you feel that educators really should be paying attention to, like over the next little while?
Oh, goodness. I tossed my crystal ball out a couple years ago.
There goes that question.
Yeah, because it was always very fuzzy. To be honest with you, especially 5 years. I have to point out that you are older than me. So I just wanted to point that out. So you're older. So you're from 06. I'm from 07. The very beginning of 07. You're not that much older than me. But I meant in Second Life. I didn't mean in real life. I have no idea if you're older than me in real life. I don't think you are, but in Second Life you are. And so I could not have imagined 5 years ago that this, even as stagnant as it's been for the last 3 years, that we would be where we are today. And I think that goodness gracious, the iPad's only 2 years old. And so who knows? And now they're talking about these Google glasses that are going to, with augmented reality. So, I have absolutely no clue what the next big product is going to be. What I can say to answer your question is engagement is the key to success. It's true whether you're talking about virtual worlds, that's what we talked about 4 or 5 years ago when we first started talking about this, was the engagement. You're so engaged in the virtual world. It's very engaging, right? Now, augmented reality, where you can take your phone. I have this app. I happen to live in a metropolitan area where I can do this. New York, I live just outside of New York City. As a matter of fact, I attend school in Manhattan. So, it's very easy for me. I have this one app that it's called What Was There? And people upload their old pictures of streets and buildings, and they load them into this app, and you can go and hold your phone up, and it will show you through your viewfinder an opaque picture of what that street looked like from the same vantage point that you're at as to what was there. The same idea as if you hold your phone up and it shows you, a bubble pops up that says, ooh, this is Einstein Bagel, and ooh, this is Starbucks, and ooh, this is the Chrysler Building, and then you can click on it and it tells you about the Chrysler Building. So those kinds of cool things that are engaging the users, that's the key. That's the key to success in anything, I think, that's going to, because the attention span on people have gotten shorter and shorter, right? Because, we were called the TV generation because we have commercial length, 15 minutes, then we have to have a commercial, and then another 10 minutes, and then we have to have a commercial. And now it's even shorter than that. And it's not, I don't know that it's necessarily the attention span, but it's our overwhelming desire to take in data, whether that's conscious or subconscious, right? We want more and more and more. Give me more, give me more. That's why people are constantly on their mobile devices. They constantly want to interact. They constantly want to engage with their communities. or with whatever, Facebook. It's a great example. They want to engage with their friends. They don't go on there. Twitter, okay, maybe Twitter's a little bit voyeuristic, but you feel part of a community, so you're engaging with it, albeit passively, right? So whatever the next thing is going to be, it's going to be just like what this thing was and what the thing before it was, in the respect that it's going to be engaging. And so perhaps the question wasn't a dead question after all.
This idea of engagement, though, is there? I mean, it certainly, and I'm going to go back a little bit further than I care to admit, but the advent of email was, this is this big evil thing. Oh my God, people can actually, reach me in terms of electronic messages, and to a certain extent, because everybody just started, instead of communicating with one another, they started emailing with one another. And we've now gotten to a point where people are experiencing email overload, right? And we have information overload, and we have, to a large extent, are we not also creating a society where it's just constant, nonstop overload of engagement?
No, I don't think so. I think that what's happened, though, is that as these new things come up, we don't have schemata to know how to deal with them. So we haven't developed behavioral patterns and cognitive patterns that teach us how to deal with them. And so, we don't really have best practices to go on. And so this overload happens, this cognitive overload happens, because we haven't developed the foundation upon which to say, oh, that's too much, or that's not enough, or this is right, or this may not be right. And so I think that the generations that come after us they'll have us as the giants upon whose shoulders they can stand. And so I think that we will continue to evolve, and as far as being able to deal with this, so information overload. Everybody said that the internet, that all these social networks and everything, we're going to create all these zombies who were sitting in their parents' basements forever, and never leaving the house, and that just that just didn't happen. Does it happen? Of course it happens. It happens, but it happened before too. I don't think that the information overload or that the excessive availability of different communities caused that. I think that there were people who were like that before. What I think is that younger people have learned to modify their behaviors, adapt to that. Now we have the whole issue of security, right? And so as a society, we're learning how to deal with this sort of thing. And we will continue to learn how to deal with it. Studies are beginning to show that younger people these days are more conscious of security and how to keep their privacy and private data secure than students or young people who are just slightly older than them, because they, again, stood on the shoulders of the people before them. So there will always be something that challenges us as a society, again, because we're innovative. Humans are innovative. We're very creative people, and we like to advance, and we like to, there's a conservative aspect in that respect, certainly. There are people who aren't like that. But I think overall we're looking for the next frontier, and I think that we will develop the appropriate behaviors and ways to deal with these things as we're presented with them. But it's not going to happen in one day or 1 year. It's going to happen over time.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that point a little bit where you're talking about younger people having a greater sensitivity to the protection of their, their identity and their personal information. By the same token, is not that generation that's also growing up also becoming much more open in terms of how they are sharing information, in terms of what's there. So we've got this dichotomy between the fact that by virtue of the fact that we have all these social networks, that they're more open, but at the same time they're finding ways to sort of protect their little niche of individuality in terms of who they are.
Right. So Yeah, I think that they are, although I might make a distinction by not conflating identity and personal information, because those are two very different things. I think one's identity, who one is virtually, or how they present themselves virtually, is perhaps different than the personal information that we don't want to share, right? We don't want kids, and I mean kids, 10, 11, 12-year-olds sharing their home address on the internet, right? So, but do we want them sharing that they're Roger the Rocket in some virtual world, and that that's a part of who their identity is, right? I mean, everybody knows. Well, anybody who's in a virtual world goes through that, right? So I'm AJ Brooks here in this virtual world, and to many people who know that I'm AJ Kelton, in the actual world, they know what they know about me is what they experience here in Second Life, what they read at at my website or wherever it is they find out information about me, the persona that they see on either Facebook, if I'm Facebook friends with them, which I'm, or on Twitter or whatnot. That's what they get about my identity. But that is not my personal information. And so I think that there's a real gulf, and hopefully a gulf between those two, and hopefully that's what we're teaching our kids, right? Part of the problem here is that it's really hard for us to teach kids what they should be doing when we're still learning it ourselves, right? Things are changing so rapidly that, I mean, the reason that kids are excessive on the phones is that we don't know how to, and social networks and how they use social networks is that we still haven't learned, what the way to use them ourselves. We need to be the guides. We need to not be taking the technology away from them and saying you can't use it, and then under our breath, because I can't help you and I can't teach you how to use it. We need to be saying, okay, you can use it, and here are the conditions under which you're using it. And one of those conditions is you don't tell anyone your real name. You don't tell. And these are for minors. I'm talking about specifically for minors. You don't tell anyone your real name. You don't tell anyone where you live, because that's your personal information. I mean, I don't post my Social Security number anywhere. I don't post my address anywhere. Although, I mean, I have my name, but that's different. So, anyway, I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, no, it's. I think to a certain extent, I could almost, have almost another full hour of a conversation just on that. But I know that we're sort of approaching the top or the bottom of the hour, as the case may be. So I'm actually going to ask you to bring back the crystal ball for one last question here in terms of, what do you think the impacts of virtual worlds will be on society 5 to 10 years from now?
It's really been great being a guest. Thank you very much. No. Well, I mean, today, from today's vantage point, right? I mean, it's like saying, what's going to be the weather next month? I have no idea, but I have some general idea that it's probably going to be warmer than this month, right? So, looking 5 years, 10 years, oh my goodness, that's so far off to even try and venture a guess like that. But I think that virtual worlds are going to have a place. We just haven't figured out the technology, and the industry and the people who use it just haven't figured out what that place is quite yet. I think that virtual worlds and augmented reality will probably merge to some extent, so that it'll be maybe more holographic in nature, where instead of sitting and looking at a screen, we're looking at the virtual worlds through a set of regular eyeglasses, not those big bulky glasses that you would have to wear, or even ones like you go to a 3D movie. Regular eyeglasses, and so instead of looking at this screen, I'd be seeing the image in my eyeglasses, perhaps even as if I were sitting here in the amphitheater. Perhaps that, but even I think, we're going to, you replay this in 5 years from now, and that'll have happened 3 years before that, and they're going to say, oh, look at this guy, he thought it was going to be 5, 10 years, and it happened, 2 years after he said it. So I just think that things are going to start to come together, and we're going to begin to see new technologies pop up that we had no clue about today. That's the best answer I can give.
That's perfectly acceptable. Pookie's got her question at the end of her show, and this is my question at the end of this one. So listen, that's pretty much all the time that we have for the broadcast show today. AJ, it's been wonderful having you on the show, and I'm really looking forward to good things to come from both you and the Education Roundtable and from EDUCAUSE as those particular things move forward.
Thank you. It has been my pleasure. I really, really enjoyed this. Awesome.
Well, that's it from the Rockcliffe Rotunda. I mean, we'll be back in approximately 3 weeks, and so join us here again at that particular point in time. Inside the Avatar Studio is produced by Bevan Whitfield and Rockcliffe University Consortium. Technical production by Robustus Hacks and Mel Burns in association with Metaverse TV. For more information on Inside the Avatar Studio, please check out our website at avatarstudio.info or subscribe to our Twitter or Facebook fan page at uRockcliffe.